Okay, we're gonna get started in a few minutes, like 3 minutes.
Do we need to use these mics? Can we put them on the side? We can just hold them. I can hold them like yeah, so we could just take it down. I'm out. Everybody loves it. They've never seen people talk so men, like men talking that honestly about like, man, I be out there. Like they're not saying stupid stuff. It's like it's like Jamie. Don't think like that. Well, I would say share. Just make sure you don't go past 55 minutes. And then we'll open the door. I'm excited about this. Still on the shade. I mean, I get to share a stage with Jamie and Steve Ross and Preston. Huh? That's it, bro. Ooh. Check, check. 1, 2, 2.
All right, we're gonna start. You could take your seats. Oh, and everyone, you could move closer up. Yeah, so we're in the marriage and dating track with BJ and Vanja, Preston Perry, and Steve and Jamie Ross. So we're just gonna get started right now.
Thank you so much. How's everyone doing today? Let's try it again. How's everyone doing this evening, this afternoon? Good, good, good. We're so excited to be here with you. My name is BJ Thompson, and I serve as the director of an organization called Build a Better Us. We serve couples and also help develop people. And we are extremely honored for you guys to be at the Q&A. If you could, because we want to make room for the stragglers. Y'all know how the stragglers like to come in at the last minute. If you could just scoot up a little bit, there's open seating, and that way when the stragglers come in, they can come into the back and they don't interrupt the stuff that we're doing. I'll give you just a couple of just quick things before we get started and get opened up. This is a Q&A around singleness, marriage, dating, and my current situation. That means that we will field questions around all those areas. You do not have to be married. You do not have to be single. And you can have a situationship, a very complicated relationship dilemma. And so we'd love to field questions in there. Just a few things to get started, just to get you guys rolling. we're about to share a little bit about who we are and where we're from. And if you could, do us a favor, write down 1 or 2 questions that you would potentially like to ask, again, around the areas of singleness, marriage, dating, or my current situation. And then you could have them accessible. Do we have a text in number, or do you just want them to write it down? Okay. Okay. We could. So you can just write them down and then get prepared for that. Like I said, we'll share who we are, opening up. And then from there, we'll open up the field for questions that you've written down. And then we'll try to get some good dialogue going. That all right for y'all? Good. Do I have cue cards? If you have pens, we could. Yes. Yes, please. Please, brother. Thank you, please. Thank you and please. Please and thank you. Okay. Well, I'll open us up since I'm talking loud and I'm already on the mic. So, again, my name is BJ Thompson, Dallas native, not a Cowboy fan or hater. This year, my wife and I, Vanja, have been married for 15 years here in a couple of weeks. All right. Give it up for that. Y'all pray for me. It's been a long journey with me. Being from Dallas, one of the things, and I kind of shared this a little bit in my story, you know, I think oftentimes we enter into the space and conversation about relationships as people who've had it all together. We hear a lot of people pontificating and talking about how they had it together. I'm not that person. I come from a really broken background, come from a loving family, mother and father who were married up until the time my father passed, but have a lot of challenges as it relates to relationship. The way I like to refer to myself is having 0 and 50 before I met my wife, right? So I have a lot of relational experience, not a lot of success. And early on, we started out within our relationship, and I let my wife kind of share this. Realized that just because we were sincere, came to faith at the age of 19, and, you know, had a new heart, a new mind, a new desire, and thought, yo, this is great. Now I need like a new girlfriend, right? I got like a new faith, a new girlfriend. And assumed that because I had sincerity, that sincerity meant maturity. And got married, actually got into the relationship and got married, and realized quickly that those things did not translate over, that I was woefully unprepared for marriage. I was woefully unprepared for a mature relationship. And I was woefully unprepared for leadership. And so, truthfully, I didn't learn what it meant to be a husband and to lead in marriage until about 5 years into our relationship as a husband and wife. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of our journey. You want to share anything to that, baby?
For me and my grown-up experience, I did not have a mother and father in the home. My father was present, but my parents weren't together. And so I was raised by a bunch of passionate, dominating women. And all I knew as far as an example of marriage was the Huxtables. Yes. So anyways, once, you know, going through like high school up into college, up into meeting BJ, same type of setup, like a lot of failed relationships, and continued to put more things into my bag and brought a lot of baggage to our relationship. But once we got married, I didn't know how to be Claire Huxtable. All I knew was to be, you know, an independent, passionate woman. So it created not saying there's nothing wrong with that, but it just created a lot of, you know, interesting tensions to where I didn't have a reference point because all I had was like what it meant to be a single mom. So with, you know, seeing the example of my mom. So yeah, my references were not healthy.
Hi, I'm Steve Ross. This is my wife, Jamie. She'll speak, but we are from Los Angeles. So, yeah, all my West Coasters, throw up the dove, huh? Yeah, so we're born and raised in the same community in L.A. And today is our wedding anniversary, 16 years. 16 years, yeah. So, you know, BJ let me sit next to my woman, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I mean, you know, the wonderful thing about our story, I think that I would want to share with you all is that we've been married for 16 years. but we've known each other for our whole lives. So we were neighbors. We grew up together. And by the time we were in high school, we were quote unquote high school sweethearts. And with as much of the romantic story and all of the kind of textbook movie stuff that affords in terms of a blessing, it also has come with a lot of challenges that we had to learn early on how to fight fair. We had to learn how to forgive because we carry a lot of baggage all the way back from our teenage years, mistakes and other people, other relationships, all those kinds of things we had to learn how to work through with grace. The Lord has done an amazing work, I think, with the way he's shaped our family and even built the rhythm of our family and giving us a family. So we also have children. We've got 3 boys and 4 girls, so we have 7 children. Yeah, it's a blessing. It's a blessing. So I heard. So pass the offering that away. You can write checks to Jamie Ross's name. But yeah, so the crazy thing is that he has done a lot of work in our family in a short period of time. 16 years is like, oh man, that's great. But at the same time, it's just a good start. And we're still young and we're just getting started. And so we've gone through a lot of seasons of changes. And I think that the Lord's been gracious to us throughout that time.
Yeah, I'm Jamie, as he said, and I appreciate what he was sharing. I'll just kind of jump on that. I would say one of the biggest challenges that we experienced very early in our marriage was miscarriages. So after our first, people always look like, man, you guys got 7 kids, and but they were gifts from the Lord because at 21, we were told we weren't going to have any more. So we had our first child at 19. Right after we got married, our first was born, and we were so young. We were looking like, is there an instruction manual with this when we left the hospital? How do we leave with this kid by ourselves? But shortly after she was born, we had a series of miscarriages. So 3 years, 3 miscarriages within that time. And so just being 20, 21, 22, and we didn't have any solid relationships around us that young that could encourage us. And my parents were married, and I think Steve had a stepdad. But just most of our friends, our bridal party was in high school. So we were just very young. I remember when we got married, we were given a gift a couple nights in Las Vegas for a wedding gift for our honeymoon, and we couldn't check in the hotel because we weren't 21 and it was a casino. So we were very, very young, very little support, and just kind of what Steve was sharing, learning how to fight fair, and we were not believers when we got married. So it just really was God's grace to bring us to 16 beautiful, beautiful years. So.
Isn't that sweet? Cupcaking. What up, y'all? My name is Preston Perry. I'm a little black boy from the south side of Chicago. Was born and raised here. I'm the only person on the panel, as you can see, without a spouse because my wife, her flight got delayed, so she can't be here. Aw. It'll be all right. Me and my wife, we've been married for three and a half years. It's been 3.5 years. Yeah. We're like the newbies up here. Hey, I feel, young. We have a daughter named Eden Grace Perry. She's 2, and she tries to drink out of the toilet every now and then and stuff like that. Me and my wife, our relationship has been very interesting. My wife, she came out of the homosexual lifestyle, and I was her first male boyfriend, husband, fiance, everything. The task of pursuing her was a very daunting task. I had to deal with a lot of daddy hurt with her. Just her being a homosexual and not having male interaction or physical interaction like that. And then the root of it, she just didn't trust men. So I dealt with, when God led me to pursue her, I dealt with a lot of rejection. I dealt with a lot of her fears, her snapping on me for no reason. breaking up, and it was just a lot of drama. But God taught me how to be patient. He taught me how He loves His church patiently, and how He's long suffering with His church. And He taught me how to love without condition. And yeah, I read this book called This Momentary Marriage, and one of the things that John Piper said is that if God gave us a spouse that met our every condition, we would never learn how to love unconditionally. Wow. And that changed how I thought about marriage, thought about just everything, and then it allowed me to pursue her like Christ of the church. And 3 years later, we're in love, and we don't have the problems that we used to have. She loves not men, but me, which is a blessing. Yeah, and God is good. Amen. So if you guys have any questions, the floor is open now to, yeah.
This is for the field. So what you can do is raise your hand, and we'll try to go in order. And I think there's a wireless microphone, and we'll just start there. So
Come on, y'all. This is why y'all here.
And if you could state your name and then question.
Hello, I'm Angelica Navarro, and I recently read this book called Lady in Waiting, and it talks about being content in your singleness, so it's like a really good book. But it also talked about how we should go about dating, and it talked about like group dating and like kind of not doing it in a private sector, and I kind of just was confused on that. Like, what is your advice for people who want to seek a godly relationship and don't want to leave the door open for temptation, but also don't want to like not get to know the person because you're always around other people?
You know, that's I think the first thing we do is gravitate to that when we want to give sound, like good biblical counsel to singles who want to be married, because we want to help people to think through how to guard your heart, right? And to how to preserve purity and those things. And so I think the principle is good overall, to really incorporate other people into your relationship. And I think that's what I would take away. Not necessarily does it always have to be that you are dating in a group, but you should always have other people being involved in your relationship. That you're involved in the lives of other people, and that you find people who are worthy to imitate. So couples that you would say, you know what, we want to be like them, and that you involve them in the atmosphere of it. But then I also want to add a little bit, and I heard this from the most unlikely person. You guys know who John MacArthur is? Maybe, maybe not. John MacArthur was asked by a group of singles the same question, and he said, no, you need to get alone. You need to have time with just you and her. He was talking to some single guys, and he said, at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to know whether or not this is a relationship that you want to pursue if you're always doing it in the context of a whole bunch of people, because y'all are trying to impress a whole bunch of others. And what he said was, you need to be able to have some time to date your spouse and get to know her. And so I would say the same thing. I mean, you got to be able to marry both. It's both and.
Can I piggyback? I'll just piggyback off that. I think everything he said was good. Also, too, when me and my wife, we were engaged, we had to learn how to communicate so we can know each other's boundaries before we got married. So I think that everything they said is true, but I think it's also a level of wisdom that we have to have with the person that we're dating, because we do need those dates when we like going out to the movies by ourselves, building where I can talk to you. But we told all our friends, literally, every time we're alone, we start kissing. Like, and I want to do more. Like when I start kissing, I don't know about other brothers. So we told our friends, we was like, please, if we're at your house and we are doing a movie night, please don't leave us alone. Like, please don't leave us alone. One time my friend, he told like, well, I'm going to sleep. But we was like, what you doing? You can't. Like, literally, Jackie looked at her like, what you doing? You not honoring our wishes. Okay, if you going to bed, we leaving, because we cannot be left alone. And I think it's just knowing your boundaries so that you won't sin against God.
We'll take the next question. He's right here. Oh, come on, brother.
Yeah, just to each of you individually, what is the hardest part? Oh, Walter, sorry. My name's Walter. Nice to meet you all. To each of you individually, what is the hardest part of marriage for you guys?
Okay, I'll open with this. So what I would have said early on, the hardest part of marriage is trying to relate to a woman and the uniqueness of what that means. Having never lived with another woman beyond my mother and my sister, and then get into conflicts, and this woman is laying next to me in bed. And so, yeah, I think part of it is the gender issue. I think I would have said that early on. I think now the most challenging part about being married is thinking about the long ball and not the short-term game. Like, we were just so excited to get to the honeymoon and, you know, the marriage, the actual wedding, that I really hadn't done a good job of thinking about, like, wait, how are we going to prepare our growth for 50 years of this? And so I would say the most challenging part now is, like, navigating new seasons of life. You know, so we've lost parents. We've had children. We've gone through dark times. We've lost jobs. We've gone through periods of deep confusion about our faith. And we've gone through periods of strife. Like, there's so many things that we've endured. I feel like the most challenging part is almost settling into your heart that I'm going to be in this over the long haul, and realizing that you're kind of learning as you go. And so, yeah, that's what I would say now. I used to would have said, you know, geez, so different from me, and leaves toothpaste on the counter. Okay, women's, y'all know y'all do that sometimes. Don't act like we're the only ones that leave toothpaste on the counter. Drawers, guys leaving drawers on the floor. But I used to say that. I used to think, like, yo, it's just because of the gender differences. Now I think the most challenging part for me is, like, we're both changing. That's what I wanted to say. The woman that I married August 10th, 2002 isn't the woman I'm married to today. And vice versa. Vanja can tell you that the man she married August 2002 isn't the same man today. And we've had to adjust to the person that we're married to today, not the person we were married to when we got married. And yeah, that's taken a lot of growth and maturity. So that's what I would say.
What comes to mind for me is just reconciling in my mind that I don't always know best. And I mean, obviously you don't think that, but when it comes to, like, some of the realities that you deal with in your relationship, a lot of times you can rationalize why you chose to make that decision, why you responded like that, and why you feel this way. Like, you have a reason. You don't just, you know, randomly have these feelings and thoughts. So you begin to rationalize it and think, well, obviously I have a reason, so therefore I'm right. But then realizing that I'm dealing with a whole nother individual who had different life experiences, and, you know, what he experienced and how he thinks may be just as right for him. And so it's us coming to, like, a mutual understanding of, I value your experience, I value your opinion, I value whatever it is that you're going through. Therefore, and I want you to value mine, so it's not as if, like, what I say is law and I need you to adjust and come on my side. It's no, we have to value one another's views and experiences and, like, stances on the current situation that we're dealing with, so that I can see his point of view and vice versa, because a lot of times it's hard for you to see someone else's point of view if you've been hurt, or if you feel like what you believe or what you think is correct. And so I think that's one of the hardest things, and I think it's still something that I have to wrestle with, is being like, okay, well, I feel extremely hurt by this situation, and you need to see that, but also understanding that there's something that I don't understand, maybe what he was trying to communicate, or yes. So that's really not our situation. I'm talking about a friend situation. But no, it's just being able to understand, like, you're dealing with two different individuals who have, you know, thoughts, beliefs, and experiences, and you're bringing it to this common, you know, union. And you're not always correct, and you have blind spots. And so being able to wrestle through that, basically being humble, is, I think, one of the hardest things.
Yeah, with me, I'll just piggyback what my brother said. Learning how to adjust and leading a woman who's consistently changing. Because I think that one of the things that I struggle with, because me and my wife, we were like really, really close friends for 3 years before I even felt any urge to pursue her. So when I married her, treating her like I treated her in 2009, and not knowing that she's growing, God is sanctifying her, God is changing her and not meeting her new needs and not meeting how God has changed her. And we just had a lot of conflict. And my wife, like, Preston, why you keep doing the same thing? Like, don't you notice I've changed? Like, I'm like, no, I haven't noticed really, but that's my fault, So just learning how to being watchful over my wife's growth, and then catering to her growth.
For me, I would say I naturally want to roll over my husband, and I think that's just, I understand that's just a part of the fall. It's a part of the curse, is that we want to roll over. We want to be Lord over our own home a lot of times. And so I just always had this mentality, if you can't do it right, you have to do it yourself. And so it's like, man, well, when we would have disagreements, or if we would have issues with work, then I'd say, well, let me go to work and you can stay home, or let me fix it. And I always had this mentality, this mindset that I needed to conquer and fix everything. And I think that was touched on a little bit earlier, probably through BJ and then even through my husband yesterday in the marriage track, but just that we, a lot of times as women, we want to be able to control and to solve and fix for X. And I really do see that it could be a gift from the Lord if it's not done in a sinful way, where we are gifted to multitask a lot of times. Like, I can cook dinner, and I have a baby on the hip, and I'm doing a spelling test, and I might be sweeping and running a load of laundry and on a phone call all at the same time, And so I think that in a way that we could be gifted in that way. but it brought a lack of submission very, very early in our marriage, and then even resentment, and because it didn't work out the way I wanted, and I felt like I had a better way, I had a better solution. And so I would say that, as the Lord sanctifies me, I can see more and more my ability to trust the Lord and trust my husband. But that is something that I think is still somewhat difficult at times, to trust that his decision is the best decision for our home, even if it doesn't look like the best decision for me. And it may not be like, maybe I could have thought it out better or so on and so forth, but just trusting that his leadership, like God has appointed his leadership in our household, and God has appointed him as having the wisdom to be able to have the last say, and submitting under that and trusting that, and not just submitting like, okay, well, when it go wrong, I'll fix it, and and I won't say I told you so, but saying like joyfully, like calling him Lord. And I always say, yes, my Lord, but then I say like lowercase l, like under my breath. But it's just really saying yes, even though it may be difficult. I can trust God, and I can trust your leadership because God is, God is Lord. And so I think that that's something that's been kind of difficult and still working through.
I think it'd be good too for you, Walter, on that spot, and anybody who's encouraged by that. Preston and Jackie did a workshop yesterday on roles specifically, and so you can see the video. I think it's already posted on the Legacy Facebook. For me, in the last session earlier this morning, there was a gentleman who asked the question, okay, it's good to understand I'm a mess when I'm deeply loved, but what about when you don't really feel like admitting that? Y'all make sure y'all get a shirt. Right over there. So look, so the thing is like, what his question was is like, what if I don't feel like acknowledging that? And that resonated with me so well, sitting behind him, because that, I think, has been one of the hardest things to accept in the relationship, is that I know the truth, and I know how I could fix this, because I could acknowledge my own issues, and I can acknowledge the space that I'm in. I can even acknowledge her fallenness. But if I do that right now, I'm not going to get my way, probably. And so I think it's that exercise of remembering that your marriage is a tool in the hands of the Lord to sanctify you. And I get to look in the mirror every day by staring into her eyes when she's telling me that I got it wrong, or by being able to experience the ways in which I trespass her. and essentially sin against the Lord and sin against my wife, like I'm constantly being called to repentance and faith. I'm having these kairoses regularly. It's time for you to change right now. And when I'm not committed to it, and I'm not looking like I need to be changed, then I find myself in a spot where I can actually put away all of the stuff that I know just so that I can get my way. And that's a consistent challenge. Yeah.
Take the next question over here in the front of the audience. Okay. If people are still sending in questions, if you would like to ask a question but don't want to ask it out loud, please grab some, they'll pass around papers, and then we'll just read them. So.
My name is Edmund.
What up, Edmund?
I'm doing fine, man. How about you? Awesome. So the Bible says that we are not supposed to be yoked with unbelievers. What is the boundary in a relationship where one partner may be more on fire for the Lord than the other? Is it wise or good to link up in this situation? Both believe in God, but their devotion may be different.
I just want to clarify that both are believers in this context, though, right? Okay. But just at different levels.
Is it maturity level as far as like more spiritual?
Yeah, I think I'll attempt to tackle it first. I think that you have to first define what on fire means, right? Because I think sometimes people define on fire with how much biblical knowledge you have, when that's not necessarily that doesn't necessarily mean on fire. I think somebody might not be as biblically literate as their spouse, but they might be more on fire than their spouse because they love better, you know. Yes. And I think so I think with that, I've met some men who don't know more than their spouse when it comes to biblical knowledge. They don't really know where to find Romans off top if you give them a Bible. But they lead their family well because they lead their family with love. They lead them in Bible studies. They lead them in prayer. And God calls them a great leader. So I think that if two people are in a relationship and they're both growing upwardly and not one is growing downwardly, I think that God can always do something with their relationship if both love them and both are aiming to please Jesus.
Yep, I think just to piggyback, I'm thinking of a couple verses, right? So we know that a man is supposed to love his wife as Christ loved the church, as sacrificial, and there's a certain element of I am beautifying, sanctifying, preparing her for her union with Christ that's eternal. And so I am helping her come along. And so probably need to have a posture of being a servant leader and recognize that God wants to use me as an instrument in his hands to do that. Then for a woman, I also see in the scripture that the woman wins her husband by a gentle and a quiet spirit. The way that she responds, even if he is, in that context of Peter, an unbeliever. And so here's the thing. Some people may be married into a relationship where the person is discovered later to be an unbeliever, or they, she got saved later, whatever it is, but they don't get freedom to come out of it. But one thing that instructs us concerning your question with that is that there is this possibility, or really instruction, that a woman can lead her husband to grow upward and not downward by her conduct and action. So especially in the context that you're in, I would say that there's a way to press in, and you probably just measure it out based on the wisdom that Preston shared.
Yeah, I'll try to bring some personal light to this. So my mother grew up in church, very churchy, and she shared this story with me around the passing of my grandmother. And she had this very dramatic moment, was like, man, I'm done with life. And she said, God spoke to her today. She said, you walked up to me that day and you touched me, you touched my leg, and you said, Mama, it's going to be okay. And she said, I felt like God was speaking through you at that moment to say, like, no, I'm here, I'm listening to you. My mother and father were married when I was 5. And my father came from a very challenging non-church background, hardworking, loving man who had a reverence for faith. And my mother had a legit faith and was walking, and they were married, and they were raising children, and they were loving family and shepherding. And something that's powerful when I look back at it, my father passed 4 years ago this year. But something I look back on, I talked to my mom about this. My mother loved my dad like Jesus. Hear me say this. She loved my dad like Jesus. She didn't condemn him. She tried to meet him where he was at. She was gracious with him. She was truthful when she needed to be. But she also received a lot from him. And I would say the latter years of my life, honestly, it was that quiet witness that I believe won my father to the faith. And even though he didn't have a zeal, he didn't have all this background and this knowledge and information. And it was my mother realizing, if God plants you somewhere, he wants you to grow in that area. He wants you to grow in that thing. And so I would say part of the reason why we struggle with this idea of someone being more or less zealous is because the way we define zeal, and it's really to what my brother said, knowledge puffs up, but love built up. And I think that a lot of ways we talk about people who are really on fire and are really leading, and they're clumsy, they're not humble, they're not tender, they don't see when they need to apologize. They just keep going on with a big flag talking about they're speaking truth. And God says that's arrogance. And he opposes the proud and exalts the humble. And I think the way we posture ourselves with one another, specifically within proximity to our relationships and those that are revealing about us, that when God shows us that arrogance and pride, that we're better than someone, that you reminded that you are a mess, right? The word says that he said only the sick need a physician, right? And what Jesus was alluding to in that passage, and I'll wrap up with this because I don't want to start preaching.
Go ahead.
I'm a preacher, so it's inevitable. It's going to come. It's going to come. What Jesus was alluding to in that passage was that all of y'all are sick. I don't care how much reformed, charismatic, catechized, whatever confession you come from. He said, only the sick need a physician. He's the great physician, right? And I think the more that we discover that, even in our zeal, right, it's an opportunity to repent, not an opportunity to become disgruntled about the relationship. Because again, if God has planted you in a marriage, like an actual covenant with himself, he said, what God put together, what? Let no man, that includes you. Let no man take apart. And you need to become a quiet witness. And I'm telling you from personal experience, my mother quietly loved my father up until the day he passed. And I am convinced that the changes, the growth, the love, I'm like, I think my father is coming to faith. All because my mother decided I'm going to love God, and it means to pray, to be truthful, and to give room, give and take where I can in this relationship.
So we're going to answer a couple of questions that we have personally. I have a question, very interesting question. It says, how do you let a guy know that you're available without being extra?
Thirsty?
I'm not finished. It says, there are a lot of fine guys at this conference.
Right now.
Okay.
But how do you? But I gotta finish the question, y'all. But how do you let them know that you are interested? This is my question for this. I might make a couple people mad.
No, go.
But I think to answer the first half of that question, I think the way you don't let a guy know that you're extra is not presenting yourself as available. And what I mean by that is, only if you are a treasure, You don't need to put yourself in a position to be found, but you have to let him seek you and find you. Meaning, you can't claim that you're a treasure and then put yourself in a place where somebody can find you, because you're not a treasure. You know, a treasure, when a man finds a good wife, he finds himself a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. And I think that a lot of times when we put ourselves in that position, we don't understand that you low-key have become the pursuer. It's a subtle pursuit, but it is a pursuit. You pursued him in a way where he wants to pursue you. And I'm not saying nobody has ever got married like that, but I think in a lot of ways, just off personal experiences, I've seen men not really have, even if they get into a relationship with a woman, not have the respect that they could have for you if they would have found you the way that a man was designed to find a woman. Yeah. For example, when I was friends with my wife, Jackie, my platform was kind of growing in Christian poetry world or whatever, and I was interested in a couple of girls, and every time they would let me know that they liked me, I just lost interest in them. It was not attractive no more. I was like, God designed me to pursue a woman. That's the way he designed me. He designed me to pursue my bride, right? So every time they let me know that they was interested in me, I lost just all, like, it wasn't even fun no more. I was like, you know what, you're not for me. But I began to pray. I began to seriously pray for my wife, and I began to pray about the wife that I wanted and the characteristics that I wanted in a wife. And I was sitting in my room one day, and I was like, man, I felt like God was saying, like, doesn't Jackie have all the characteristics that you ever prayed for? You pray for a woman that can encourage you spiritually. Doesn't Jackie encourage you spiritually? You pray for a wife that would challenge you and be honest with you. Doesn't she already do that in your friendship? So I began to, like, ask myself, yo, is Jackie my wife? It was just like a really weird, like, okay. And it was the Holy Spirit. So for like a month, 2 months straight, I just kind of like, and God just kind of gave me more and more feeling. Long story short, I knew in my heart, got to the point, I knew in my heart that I was supposed to pursue Jackie. And I told all of my friends, I said, Jackie is going to laugh in my face when I tell her that I'm interested in pursuing her, because I know for a fact that Jackie does not like me. I know it. One time, it was crazy because I was talking to my friend, who's a poet named Carnes Turner. He was like, how you know she don't like you? I said, she called me ugly 2 months ago. we were at the Phil Wickham concert, and Jackie told me I looked like the dude from the PJs. So I'm like, she think I'm ugly. But I feel like I'm supposed to pursue her. Long story short, I went to Jackie, and I finally built up the guts to tell her that I feel like I'm supposed to pursue her. And Jackie told me, she was like, this is crazy. Last week, I went to my discipler, and I told my discipler that I've been liking you for a year. For a whole year, and I did not know how to treat you like a crush. So I prayed and I asked God, I said, if it's meant for me and Preston to be together, help me to treat him like a brother and not a crush. And then a week later, you tell me that God is leading you to pursue me. I said all that to say this. If Jackie would have told me, or would have gave me an inkling of an indication that she liked me, I probably wouldn't have pursued her. Right? But because she was godly, because she wasn't trying to make herself be available, I found her, and I found a good thing. So be patient and trust God.
All right, so the question we got now is, I just want to know, what does it mean it's better to marry than to burn? They said they're burning, but they're not married, so help. Yeah, it is a good question. It's funny because even talking to like our teenage daughter, we have a 13-year-old daughter, and I remember maybe like when she was going into the 4th grade, which was like 3 years ago, I was, talking to her about like, do you have any crushes or whatever? And so she was like, yes, this one person, blah, blah, blah. And so I remember telling her that, having, a crush or just a desire to be connected to someone is a natural feeling. And you shouldn't be ashamed of that, but it's what you do with it. And so my advice was like, don't try to manipulate situations and put yourself around this boy on purpose, or, be upset if he starts dating somebody, whatever that means in 4th grade. But I was like, just know, like, you're not allowed to have a boyfriend though. So anyways, that was the advice that, I started giving to her during, her interest in boys. So I would say, just even with the idea of burning, I'm assuming there's different levels of what that can look like, but knowing that it's a natural desire to, have that desire. So I don't believe that you should be ashamed of that. It's kind of what you do with that. And I feel like there's some practical things that you can do to help fight against being consumed with that burning fire. One, maybe some of the stuff that you expose yourself to. I'm not going to, be legalistic and say, don't watch this, don't do that. But if you know certain movies or certain actors or actresses cause such a, whatever inside of you, like, be mindful and wise of those things. And kind of what Preston was saying, like, make your close friends aware of those triggers. I remember at a college Bible study years ago, we were having like this group confession, and this girl was saying how, like, she just doesn't know why she keeps having all these thoughts about, guys or whatever. And she was like, when I'm laying in my bed listening to Jodeci every night, it's just, I have these thoughts. And we were like, well, that's the first problem. You laying up in your bed listening to Jodeci. Yeah, so it's like, use some wisdom. I don't know if y'all know who Jodeci is, but old school R&B group. All right. So just being mindful of what you surround yourself with. Like I said, not necessarily feeling like you have to be legalistic and making this law for everybody, but just knowing that, like, this is a weakness that I have. So I need to, know that may create more of a burning sensation. But then also figure out things that excite you. I mean, hobbies, hanging out with friends or whatever it is. Like, because obviously you can take those thoughts captive and, submit them unto the Lord. And so not treating it as it's a sin, to have a desire, but knowing how to foster that in a healthy way. Because you kind of want that to, be lingering for the sense, so you can have a genuine connection with somebody when the Lord makes it, available. But, don't find yourself sitting in situations where you're perpetuating those thoughts. So that's kind of what I have.
Next question says, do you have any advice in pursuing someone who has a mental illness, in my case, borderline personality disorder, as well as maintaining a marriage with that person? It's a very sensitive topic and very personal, I think. So if the answer that we give doesn't really kind of meet what your expectation was, I would invite you to come and talk to us after, so we can maybe sit down and just address things in a more directly and personally. But here's what I can say: there are no things that the gospel cannot heal, and that the gospel, that a marriage cannot glorify God in, because a marriage and covenant keeping in a marriage is about telling the truth about the gospel. And so if you have the opportunity to love someone selflessly and sacrificially, and to be able to do that, I'll speak from the man's perspective, to be able to do that in the manner of loving her like Christ loves the church, then that means that you're willing to give up certain comforts, that you're willing to let go of certain things that you may consider to be rightfully yours, even those aspects of relating to a person, and in communication and things like that, because you see it as, or because you love them and you're committed to loving them. And so I think the advice is that if you're in that circumstance and you have a relationship that is already brewing with someone, or you are that someone, I can't really tell by the way it's written, but if you're in that relationship, the advice that I would give you is to lean on the Lord and to be able to press and to press in God's grace, and the Lord can do amazing things. Personality disorder can be fleshed out in various ways. There might be a person who has split personalities, and one day I'm this way, and the next day it's like, who are you? And I don't even know who you are. But I know that the Lord can show himself to be faithful in a God-glorifying marriage, even in that circumstance. But I also know that there are behaviors that are learned as well. And again, this is where I don't want to be insensitive, but I will say that shaping influences and things that happen to you when you're a child and those things may lead you to a spot to where the Lord wants to actually free you from that. And those can be unlearned behaviors. And the Lord can, by his word, actually release a lot of that. And you can be walking and talking in your straight mind. And so, anyway, come and approach us afterward so we can talk a little bit more about that one.
That's good. Y'all got some great answers. So this question reads, what kind of changes did you make when you started having children to adjust for the new challenges of the new season in your marriage? I think having children is just interesting. It's an interesting thing. It's like, because I got married to pursue and to have oneness with Vanja. It never came on my radar we're going to have some little babies somewhere running around. Right? And I think initially it's fun because it's cute until you go through pregnancy. And so if you have not, can I be vulnerable with y'all today? You know, pregnancies can really depend on the person and even the number of the pregnancy. It could be the first pregnancy or the third pregnancy or the seventh pregnancy. And they all vary from person to person. And one thing I would say is I was just unprepared for what was coming during pregnancy. You know, my wife was not just changing or her belly was getting bigger because she had a baby. Psychologically, she was changing. And, we just started having challenges. And I was like, yo, is it me? I don't know what this means. And so one, I think there's almost a baptism by fire that occurs, and if I can be very vulnerable here, I grew up in a community that was a victim of historic racial discrimination by way of mass incarceration, and created this dynamic of only single moms. And so everyone I knew who had a kid was just a baby mama or baby father. And no one could even guide me through, like, what happens when your wife gets pregnant and goes through this thing. And so in a lot of ways, I was learning through our experience, and I was just completely shocked. And so one, I think if you are preparing for children, prepare not just for the child once they're born, prepare for the actual pregnancy, that the pregnancy could take on ebbs and flows. It could be sickness the first 6 weeks and vomiting and nausea. It's not just weird cravings, it's weird smells, right? Like, so you smell funny and you need to go take a shower because your spouse is grossed out by that cologne you use or chicken or just something really obscure in your mind.
Jackie loves cats.
She does. Yeah, she loves some weird stuff while she was pregnant. But yeah, so one is just during that actual pregnancy. And I would say this just for you people who are married or looking to get married. Don't be shocked, and I need to say this, and I hate to say this publicly, but I need to say it. Don't be shocked if your physical intimacy changes during pregnancy. There's been a lot of people who've struggled when it gets to physical intimacy during pregnancy. It is a very challenging and can be a different situation. And there's a lot of people who've stepped out of their marriage because they felt like it wasn't what it was supposed to be. And I'll just say, hold on. What I would say specifically with children is this, and this is my philosophy. Children are a part of our family. They're not the center of our family. Right. And I would just give you a practical step, especially for those of you who are overly nurturing to your children. So our children know our bedroom is a sanctuary, right? You're only there because you're too small to help yourself, right? And you're there. I mean, that's why you're there. You're like, nobody can help you. If we just left you there, you wouldn't make it through the night, right? So that's why you're in the bedroom. But the moment you get a little bit more autonomy, we're going to inch you out the door, right? Like, you get out of this thing. And Vanja knows this. And so we had to go through this whole cycle of saying, hey, we want our children to see this place, our marriage, is a sanctuary. They don't just get to intrude. So I'll give you a couple examples. One, when our children were very young, 1 to 2 years old, they could walk. They were in other rooms. They'd wake up at 2, 3 in the morning, right? You guys, if you have children, you know this. They're up. Daddy! Like, that's true. Like, they're at the door waking up. And it's 3 in the morning, right? So, you know, mama wants to cuddle with them and kiss the baby to sleep and all that stuff. I look at my wife. I go, pick that baby back up. March that little bow-legged self back down to that room. And watch them fall asleep, right? It's just one practical thing. Why? I am conditioning my children to see my room as a sanctuary. You don't just get to come in here, right? 2, let's just say we're sharing a moment. We're sharing a mom and daddy moment, not a family moment, but we're sharing a mom and dad moment. And I may be hugging and kissing Vanja in the kitchen, and one of the little ones wants to walk in between us. So what does dad say? This is what? Nope. This is mom and dad sharing a moment. Hey, we'll get to you in a second. Right?
Push his head back.
Right? Right? But let me tell you why we're doing this, okay? Are y'all ready? Let me tell you exactly why we're doing this. We're conditioning them to respect the sanctity of marriage. They're going to leave our homes. And it's just going to be her and I. And I need them to see what it looks like to love their spouse. The word of God says when a man leaves his mother and father, he cleaves to his wife, not his children. Right? And so as much as I love my children, they're going to watch us prioritize this because, again, they're not the center of our family. They're a part of our family. And I think that's how you get them to help to be a part of the house. That's how you get them to be, you can go on vacations now. So where most people are struggling to go on vacations because their children can only sleep in the bed with them and they have intimate issues because children don't want to get out the bed and it's 2 in the morning. No, we don't have that issue because we have had to die to ourselves. And as cute as my little ones are, and I'm a baby person, you guys have been around me, you know this, as cute as my youngins are, I know that it's not for their good and for the good of our relationship to allow them to operate in a way that would not give them the progressing freedom that they need as children. So that was convicting, brother. Yeah.
I wanted to piggyback on that because I see how, as the mother, we are tempted to overcompensate and overcuddle, and it's just God has created us to be nurturers, and so typically, for myself, like I'm all they have, you know. It's like we're both the parents, but for some reason, when they're looking at us and they're sad, well, dad is pushing their head out the door, and the door is closing slowly, and their eyes are in the door. And then the fingers go under the door, and you see the little dimples on their fingers, and he's stepping on their fingers. Like, well, wait, they're too small. They don't understand. So I'm tempted typically to just a little longer. But, you know, the Lord convicted me about that as well because just to see how the original marriage was created, like Eve was for Adam. And as wives, like God has given us the role to be for our husbands, to be helpmeets, to help them, to walk with them. And a lot of times our children interfere, and where they are gifts from the Lord, like they are not our priority. Our husbands are. And if we cannot love our husbands well because of our children, then we're not doing something right. And that's something that I really had to chew on, especially having 7 kids. I'm like, how can I give my husband like my first at the end of the day after all of this, you know? But whatever, like I had to reevaluate, rethink, how can I make him my reward at the end of the day, the way he comes home and looks to me as his reward. And so that's just a good challenge. It's something I just kind of wanted to jump on the back of that.
You got
so
7 kids, you can do whatever you want.
Nah, that was convicting what he said because I'm the opposite. My wife's usually one of like, Preston, let that girl go in her room. I'm trying to talk to you. But she just, Daddy, play hide go chic. And I'm just, and I cannot resist.
Say no to that.
Like, I just got home. I'm trying to talk to you. So that was convicted. Yeah. This is a hard question. It says, what advice could you give someone who is running out of patience and feeling like God doesn't seem to be showing them signs of bringing the one when they are full of crave for a relationship? I like the way you structured that sentence. I like that. Full of crave.
That's a godly man or a woman.
Yeah.
I just want to say that.
Yeah. Okay. So the advice I would give is, God probably is giving you signs. He probably is. And one of the signs that he's probably giving you is allowing you to see yourself, because I think a lot of times when we feel like we're running out of patience to be in a marriage, I think God is showing you that your relationship probably is not where it needs to be with him. You're probably not as satisfied in Christ as you think you are. And because of that, it's impossible for it. Well, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have natural desires to be in a marriage or relationship, because that's the way God designed us. He designed us to be husbands, wives. So that's a natural feeling, but it should not make us feel like God has forgotten about us, because our relationship with him should be enough. Like, so if it is enough, we have to live our lives like, if God never allows me to get married, will I be content with Jesus? If you cannot answer that question, God is probably still trying to show you some things about yourself. If you can't really answer that question, if you can't answer the question that if I never get married, or if he never brings to me a husband or a wife, will I be just cool with Jesus for the rest of my life? God is probably trying to reveal some things in your heart. And those things that he reveals in your heart actually helps get you prepared for marriage once you deal with him. So me and Jackie, I can honestly say we were content in our singleness. Jackie didn't want to be married. Like, God did some work in our heart. She was like, I'm cool. I'd rather not deal with no men. But we were content, and because we were content, we were able to be joined together in marriage and have a fruitful marriage, because we were content in Jesus first. So,
amen. Can I add one thing to that? And because I think sometimes we hear that just be content, be content, be content. And sometimes it is us as leaders being lazy, because we are not emotionally intelligent, and we can't help you with relational trajectory. So we're just telling you to be content because we ain't got nothing else. But I also want to encourage us in something. As much as I love my spouse and I love my baby to death, one day one of us is going to leave this world. And I think something that we don't have the sobriety to see is that really when we say being content in Christ alone, one day you will have to separate from the person you love. And this thing that we keep beating in the drum beat for, be content with Christ, will be your reality. And so I would just say singleness is a preparation for potentially one day your widowed life. And one day we will probably be widowed for one another. And it could be either one of us. And I think, don't hear that it's just some passing statement, because I think it usually holds no weight for us. But sometimes this is reality. And the older I get, the more death I see, the more I'm recognizing, like, this contentment in Christ thing alone is much bigger than what I've given it credit for. And the reality of losing my mate is something much realer than what I'm even ready to deal with at this point. So, yeah, I just want to throw in that sobriety of being content in Christ in a mortality of people. So,
and I'll just say quickly, like, even in the contentment realm, like, God is calling all of us, even in the situation, in the lifestyle that we're in right now, to be content, because there are some people who are having a hard time in their marriage, and the easiest thing for them to do would be to jump ship, but God is calling them to be content. And then there's some marriages when they desire having children, but at this time they cannot. And so God is calling them to be content. And then me, like, I have friends, I want to do coffee dates, and if I leave the house, like, our house will be on fire. And so God is calling me to be faithful and be content there. So I just wanted to kind of speak to that too, where that is difficult when you're looking at strong marriages and you have a desire for companionship and you desire to be loved and in that realm, and but knowing like, man, God has called me to be content and I don't know how long this is going to last. But in every area of our lives, like God uses different situations in the life of the believer to call us to contentment, whether it be marriage, singleness, children, financial, like whatever it is. Like God has called each one of us. He's given each one of us a lot to hold and to carry, to walk into contentment. So, this one? Okay. It says, as someone who strongly believes that God creates us with certain characteristics, traits, etc., how can I, as a single woman, maintain a gentle, quiet meekness without being myself? It's important to me to be real and authentic without being extra. So I think that she's saying, how do I be gentle and quiet and meek if that's not my natural characteristic? I think that's maybe, more outgoing, more authentic, maybe very direct. And she's asking, like, how do I be gentle, quiet, and meekness if that's not naturally how I'm created to be? I'd say, however you are, God has created you that way on purpose. So there's no mistake. And even the gentle, quiet spirit, like, it's doable, even in being a bold, authentic person. God has created you to be passionate, but gently. And I'm thinking about Proverbs 3, and that was something that the Lord used in my life for a while, where it says, let not kindness and truth forsake you, bind it around your neck, write up on the tablets of your heart. And for me, I struggle with that because I am typically the more timid, quiet, and so I was not honest with a lot of my good friends. And I was just like that girl where it's like, man, when I had an opportunity to be honest, I didn't want conflict, I didn't want to hurt her feelings, so I'm going to just be kind. And then when I finally was truthful, then I'm like blunt and hurtful. And so like God took me through a season of just really being faithful to both. Like if you're not a friend that's honest, you're not a real friend. And so just as I'm looking through that gentle, quiet spirit, like God has called us to be kind and truthful. And so if you find that you're not, ask the Lord to change you to be that person. It doesn't mean that you have to change who you are, but ask the Lord to give you the ability and give you wisdom on how to speak in a way that is kind and that is gentle and still be authentic and truthful. And then even maybe some accountability. Some people who you know who love you but who will tell you the truth. And then you can say, hey, if you find that I'm too blunt or I'm too this way, like, can you let me know? Can you help me be accountable to you? Would you give me some ideas on a better way to communicate that? Because I honestly had to learn to be honest. And it wasn't even that I wanted to be a liar. It was just abrasive. And to me, I'm like, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings. But just kind of creating accountability, say, hey, can you help me to be more straightforward? Can you help me, like without the fluffy, like just speak to me truthfully because I know you love me, so just tell me. And so I don't know if that answered your question, but hopefully that's kind of, okay.
Next question came, and I saw your hand, so keep that. Don't forget it, all right? Next question, this is a real simple one, or not simple, but I think I have a quick answer for you. As African-American Christian couples, have you had to filter Christian marriage resources to the context of African-American relationships, or has there been any African-American Christian relationship resources that you have access to? Number one, that's what we're doing. Okay, so I want y'all to remember, Build a Better Us. That's really one of the. I mean, it's the center of the mission. Is to kind of tell the truth and to reshape the story, retell the story from minority perspectives, not only for minorities, but recognizing that there's no just majority hold on these things. And I understand, and I'm very sensitive to that question because I shared in our session yesterday that there's one book, This Momentary Marriage, Preston just talked about it again, that we offer up to every couple that we meet. And so, yeah, it changed our lives too. And so we offer that. We give that away. We gift it. We counsel through that. We do premarital counseling with people through that book. But the issue is that there are times where you really got to contextualize it. And that's just because you understand your context. And there are times where in discipleship, you need to be able to take those doctrinal truths and bring them down to actually make it make sense. How does it cash out in my neighborhood? When I'm counseling a couple where all she's ever known, just like BJ just talked about, is a baby mama, and all he ever known is a baby daddy. They never seen husbands and fathers and mothers, right? They've seen people who have had children and not been faithful. And so we do ministry in the inner city, so we know we have to contextualize that. But I was going to offer up a couple of different resources. Tony Dungy and his wife, you guys know who Tony Dungy is. He was the coach for the Indianapolis Colts. All right, I'm a Steeler fan, though, so don't get too excited. So anyway, they have a book. I just looked up the name of the book. So you can write the name of this book down. It's called Uncommon Marriage, Learning About Lasting Love and Overcoming Struggles Together. And then Tony Evans also has one, A.R. Bernard's book. What's the name of that book? 4 Things a Woman Wants in a Man by A.R. Bernard. That's good. And then there's a newer one, You and Me Forever, Marriage in Light of Eternity. That's Francis Chan and his wife, written from a more minorities perspective as well. So I think that there are more resources out there. You just have to be creative in looking for them, because it is healthy to get a more holistic look that's not so suburbanized or vanilla.
I'll answer this question real quick. It's a question from a brother. Shout out to you for this good question. He said, relationships vary from one to another, but prior to marriage, what are the signs to understand or know that it is the right time to ask your girlfriend to marry you, and that she is the one that God has for you? Earlier, I talked about how one of the challenging things in my marriage is watching my wife to see in which ways that she has changed. And I think that for the brothers who are in a relationship and who you're not you're not technically the leader over her yet, or the leader of your home yet, you still need to be practicing leadership qualities even in your relationship. And that includes watching her growth and watching what she's ready for and watching what she's not ready for. Because I think a lot of times as the pursuer in the relationship, we can be ready for marriage and we can be oblivious to the growth that she's experiencing, what she's ready for and what she's not ready for. For example, when I knew Jackie was my wife way before I asked her to marry me. But I had to wait for a season where I had to watch her grow for like a year and a half. Not saying that she was immature, but when it came to marriage, as her future leader, I had to see what she was ready for. And I know if I would have asked her a year prior, then when I asked her, she probably would have said yes. But it's much more than just a woman saying yes, right? That doesn't mean she's technically ready because she said yes. And I think that me being able to watch her growth, me being able to see like she's more comfortable with me than she was 3 months ago, that our conversations are deeper now, that I see that she doesn't close up when I ask her challenging questions. These are all things, right? And even the Bible talks about how Adam, when he put Adam in the garden, he put him in the garden as a guardian, to guard over the garden, and to also guard his family, to watch his family, to watch the needs of his family. So I think watching the growth of the lady that we're pursuing will let us know when we're ready to propose and to ask them to marry us. It's key.
This question says, is it possible for God to redeem and restore a relationship after brokenness has entered from past sexual sin with each other, or is it just better to break up? Well, this is part of our reality. So, one, just to answer the first part, is it possible for God? I think just to answer that question, like if you read any book in the Bible, nothing is impossible for God. He can raise people from the dead and heal the sick just by them touching his garment, just speaking the world into existence. So there's nothing that's impossible for God. and just knowing that just for any aspect of your life and anyone else's life. But when it comes to the idea of the wounds that comes from sexual sin, and is it better just to break up? I think just from our personal experience, I mean, we didn't have the most purest of dating and engaged relationship, but I know that something, I mean, and obviously some of those things that we chose to do and some of the mindset that we brought into our marriage didn't magically disappear. Like once we had all these freedoms, we still had some of those tensions and just some of the baggage that comes along with it, and some of that guilt and shame as well. And I remember maybe like 3 months into our marriage, I was sharing some of my like guilt and shame and, some of the things with BJ. And he read Joel 2:25 says, I will repay you for the years that the locusts have eaten. And that was such a redemptive like moment for our story, because I felt like we didn't really have much to offer when it came to like, encouraging other couples and challenging people. But knowing that the Lord was able to redeem that just by believing him. We didn't have to go through any huge ritual or anything, but just knowing that the Lord is ready and willing to restore anything that you've done. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to warrant a breakup. It just depends on where you guys are. Like, what is some of the basis on why there's such a, huge sexual sin? Is it because that's all you guys have, is that sexual, compatibility or that attraction, or do you have something more that you feel like the relationship can actually thrive on? So having that foundation of, like, what is the foundation of our relationship? Is it just that we're really attracted to each other and we can't keep our hands off of each other, or do we have like a genuine, like, foundation that can actually carry us throughout years of marriage? So just kind of reevaluating, the foundation of your relationship. I mean, you can set boundaries, you can be honest and have accountability. Like, that's not as hard as what, some of us make it seem. I mean, it does take a lot of perseverance and discipline, but it's definitely possible to set boundaries and operate in that. But I would say, don't just think that, oh, we messed up or we've messed up for a period of time, that it means this is over and it's like there's no hope or there's no coming back. But maybe it does mean a breakup. Like, that was part of our story. We broke up for a while and we had to grow individually as single individuals, and to begin to, kind of reassess the situation, have a more sober mind, and not be blinded by the infatuation that we had for one another. So, yeah, I hope that answered.
Yeah, you had a question.
Go ahead, brother.
When thinking about dating or preparing for that, what should be the motive for the search? Search for another.
So the question was, when considering dating, what should be the motive for the search? And that's a great question. So what I would say is that there's a few things. So one, I think you just need to have a desire to be in a relationship. I think oftentimes we kind of deny it, like, oh no, I don't want to be, I'm single, ready to mingle. Like, no, if you want to be in a relationship, say you want to be in a relationship. Don't pretend like you got the gift of singleness. Let me tell you about somebody. I'm not gonna name their names. I ain't gonna name nobody's names. But there was a gentleman that I remember, and he would talk about, this idea that he had the gift of singleness, and it was interesting because, that was the first time I'd heard it. I didn't grow up in Christian circles, so I didn't know what a gift of singleness was. I was like, do you pay payments on that? How do you get that gift of singleness, right? But it became evident over time that this brother really loved, like, spending one-to-one time with women and encouraging them. And I was like, brother, I don't get this. It looked like you flirting to me if you got this gift of singleness. Yeah. But I think it's something about this idea of denying the obvious to avoid disappointment that some of us do, right? And so, one, don't deny the obvious to avoid disappointment, right? If God is putting it on your heart and it's becoming a part of your desire, Be honest about that. Don't lie about that. It may not be time. You may not have the person, but you don't have to deny. And I love what Vanja shared. It's God's good desire for you, right? I think when you're ready to date, you want to pursue just a couple of things. One, you need to figure out what the laws that govern relationships are. Can I be honest with y'all? Very vulnerable with y'all. Some of us wait until we married to learn about marriage. That's a mistake. It's like learning how to drive a car the first time you drive a car. It's like you don't want to just jump in. You want to have some sense of like practice and somebody coaching you through this. You want to know a little bit more about it before you actually do it. And I think part of some of the buyer's remorse that we have once we get married, if I would have known this, I would have never done it like this, is because somebody told us or didn't tell us that the journey for discovering the laws that govern relationships, both romantic, platonic, and matrimonial, that journey to learning that starts when you're single. Right. And it's no longer just the observation. It's about you getting the proper information so that you can make the applications, right? I'm convinced part of our dating life, the reason why they called it our dating culture is so wrecked, is because people have never examined the end goal. They don't know what a healthy relationship should look like, nor does the information there, nor is the application of those things progressively. So once you start sensing that desire, the goal isn't for you to go jump into something. The goal is for you to start learning in a more informed way, right? We do a thing called deconstruction. A lot of us have a lot of baggage and a lot of misconceptions and a lot of presuppositions about it. You're going to have to deconstruct your own mind. Like everything that you learn, everything that you've done, everything that you assume about relationships, a lot of it might be wrong. A lot of it might be off. You might be still on them horoscopes, waiting for somebody to match up with your magical sign. And every time you meet somebody with your magical sign, you think y'all a match, but then you don't like them because they got a bad attitude, right? Like that thing needs to be deconstructed so that you can come into a healthier experience with relationships, right? So when you feel that desire, get properly informed. Read books, right? Again, that book with A.R. Bernard, 4 Things a Woman Wants in a Man. Men, read that book. It's an amazing book. This Momentary Marriage with Piper, he really emphasizes covenant commitment. One of my favorite books, and I'm working on a book. One of my favorite books is a book with Tim Keller called The Meaning of Marriage. Do not wait until you're married to learn the laws that govern relationships and marriage. Inform yourself now. 2, you start feeling the desire, start working through your junk, right? I think sometimes, we think we kind of come as is, right? Like, I'm just coming as in. You better take me how I am. Well, that sounds good until you meet somebody who's already working through their stuff, and they're deterred by your gross emotional intelligence, your relational negligence, how you so quick to leave a situation because you got upset and you don't want to talk for weeks and days at a time. See, a healthy person will brush that off and they will overlook you because of it, right? And so I think giving yourself the space to be able to say, I'm going to start working on me, right? I'm going to start working on. So I started changing my diet a little bit. I ain't going to brag about this because it's hard. I was like, you know what? I'm trying to get fit and be fine for my boo over here, but it's hard. I can't eat sugars no more. I'm not eating carbs anymore. And it's really, really challenging. And here's the thing. You can be grumpy going through this phase, but here's what I keep thinking. I need to start investing in myself so that I can become a better me and we can become a better us. Plug. Shirts over here to the right. All right? And so again, you feel that good God desire. 1, get informed. 2, start working through your stuff. We just started a service here recently with Build a Better Us. It's one-to-one life coaching, right? And we want to help people and couples come into a better sense of themselves. You can contact Vanja. Vanja will have our cards afterwards. So if you want to connect with us, you can start inquiring on the services. But we want people to start coming into their own immaturity. The last thing I would say is get around some healthy people. Can I just say this? When you live around toxic people, all you will do is pick up toxic habits, right? You can't want to be a healthy, whole, single person, and all you around is ratchet people who are, listen, putting themselves in careless situations. You can't want to be in a healthy, whole relationship with someone else, and you don't know anyone in a healthy, whole relationship. And so what I would say is surround yourself with the type of person you want to become or the type of couple you want to be so you can begin to emulate some of those good qualities and even know some of those negative qualities so that you can begin to construct a healthier picture of relationships. So that's what I would say to that question.
Okay, we're going to pass the mic around that way, actually. Is that what you guys got questions in your hands? So we'll pass the mic around. I'm going to answer one that's here while you get around. So get the mic down that way, and then we'll have one in the middle as well. We only got 13 minutes left. Okay, so we'll try to take just two more after this. This one says, can you please speak to Dr. Umar Johnson's views on interracial marriage? Can you please speak to Dr. Umar Johnson's views on interracial marriage? Where do he live? Is he in Chicago? He around here, right? Oh, Philly. Okay, cool. I'm on the West Coast, man, so I get to go home after this. I ain't worried about him. Erroneous, you know. I mean, so here's the deal. At the end of the day, So Dr. Umar Johnson's views on interracial marriage is essentially that, for a black man to be marrying a white woman, specifically, it doesn't benefit us in the long run. He's talking about perpetuating the past, and at the same time talking about what it would be in terms of how that's damaging to the African American ethnicity. And as gospel-centered, Bible-believing, born-again believers, y'all know that we don't believe that because the gospel is the barrier-breaking power of God. And so when you think about Colossians chapter 3, that says that here there's no barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, or Jew or Greek, right? But Christ is all and in all. Or you think about even in Galatians where he talks about there not being male, female, right? Slave, free, or Jew or Greek. What it is that when you come to the gospel of Jesus Christ, that's level footing. That there's nobody who stands taller than the next individual. And so we don't even carry that presupposition into life, let alone into relationship or into marriage. And what I would say is that because everything that we want to do, yes, absolutely true, racist, right? It's just a racist statement. It would be a racist mindset to perpetuate. But what I would say is, what we want to do, every individual who is an ambassador of the kingdom, we want to actually gospelize the whole world. So what we want to do is we want to reach people and we want to disciple make. And I want to use every platform that I can to be able to further this message, to proclaim, right, the lordship, the rulership of Jesus, and to invite people to enjoy him forever alongside me. And an interracial marriage is one of the greatest ways to be able to do that. Because right at face value, it's like, why are y'all two together? And you get to tell the truth about what the gospel does and how sacrificial love looks and what it is to go beneath just the surface, to be able to point to Jesus. And so, I mean, if you wanted just whether or not we would agree with that at all, I think a unified voice would be that we have to disagree with that because it's a racist thought. But at the same time, there are some implications of the things that he's saying that also carry, it's deeper into his whole philosophy. So I would say you need a pastor if he's a person who you've been thinking through, the things that he says are the ways in which you want to model. Because they're, I always talk about decon rat poisoning. It's 99.5% barley and wheat. It's good to a rat, right? But then there's that 0.00000.5 of cyanide that kills them. And so you have to be very discerning with who your teachers are. Yeah. We got two questions down there. I think those will be our last ones.
Okay, so my name is Mila. Hi. Hi, Mila. Hey. So I don't know if anyone has that little scraggly piece of paper with the purple writing on it, but okay. So this question I think is for Preston, but if anyone wants to chime in, feel free. So one thing you said about Jackie maybe having feelings and or a word about you, but sitting on that really blessed me. Because I feel like, God really speaks to me very clearly about my future. And there are some things that he's like, I'm giving you this word now, but it's not for right now. Yeah. So that really blessed me in hearing that and saying, okay, she was able to sit on it and either trust God or at least just wait long enough for him to bring it to pass. So that was really powerful. But for you, in getting those words about Jackie or that confirmation about Jackie, how did you know for sure that it was confirmation and not your own emotional reasoning that was like, oh, okay, like maybe it's Jackie because that's my homie? It's like, no, this is coming from God. And I don't know if Jackie has ever shared anything with you about how she was able to rest on that word, but if she has, please share.
Those are really good questions. I think I was able to identify and God was able to confirm that Jackie was the one for me when I started to understand the meaning of marriage and why God created marriage. And because I understand the reason why God created marriage, I saw that Jackie will help me carry out the will of God and the glory of God for my life. For example, I felt God's leading me to, like, God never leads you to something and don't give you evidence that he led you to that place, right? He will always give you evidence, and the evidence that he gave me was Jackie would help me carry out the will of God that I knew he had for my life. So like, I can't even explain it. It was just plainly obvious that he led me to this woman. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was like, man, we complement each other in such a way. And then when I say complement each other, I want to just note, I'm not saying that we were similar. Like, because a lot of people told me that Jackie was my wife because when me and Jackie was together, she was like the female version of me in a lot of ways, right? But that was the complete opposite of why. It's because we were different. And because she assisted me in all my weaknesses, and she helped me be a better man for Jesus, right? Because that's what marriage is for. It's a picture of the gospel, and it's to help imitate the gospel. And if God is not leading you to somebody who can help you glorify himself, he's probably not leading you. Wow. You know what I mean? For Jackie, I think with Jackie, she just understood. Though she was 21, she was very, very, very spiritually mature. And she just understood the role of a man and a woman. Though we're equal in essence, our roles are different. And she understood that if this man was to be my leader, I have to let him lead now. Right? So because she didn't want somebody who, even though her flesh wanted to control a man, her heart if she wanted to get married, she wanted a man that can lead her. So she practiced that even in her singleness. She practiced me leading her even in my singleness. Okay, if he is my husband, he'll come to me. And I did. So that's what I can answer. Yeah.
Y'all supposed to snap every time Preston talks. There we go. That's how that works. 5 minutes. One last question.
Hello, my name is Montel, and I just have a question specifically for the men, specifically for passionate creatives. What does selflessness look like on a day-to-day basis, and especially when you have creative ideas that you want to get out, or even you want to work on a project, and you still have to cater to the needs of your spouse, and you still have to put your focus on her while you're passionate for the Lord and doing His work. So.
I'll briefly answer from the best of my perspective. So what my brother's asking me is, what does it look like to be someone who's passionate about a mission? It's visible that this is your profession and you want to give yourself to it. And it demands a lot of creativity, and it demands a lot of participation, sometimes resources, and still be able to steward the heart and affections of your spouse. People who can't do that oftentimes haven't done a good job investing in that area of their lives. Therefore, they only respond to the areas that seem most urgent in front of them. A lot of us, we end up in relationships because we're in the same class, or we worked at the same job, or we came from the same family or neighborhood, not because we have a healthy, well-rounded perspective on relationships. And we know how to create and develop those relationships. And so, one, I think we need to start developing that area. I find it very interesting that people can be amazing in their career fields and they're horrific at their relational life. But it's because they've never had to exercise that muscle. No one's ever forced that out of them. And they haven't invested, what I was saying earlier, in an informed perspective about it to application. They've only experienced their lived lives, and they've observed whatever their environment, right? So one, I think, is that. Two, I think it's being able to deconstruct your emotional life. Some of us are really emotionally immature, and you don't know it until you're in a relationship, especially in a marriage, and you get pushed to the edge, right? Anybody ever has somebody you love, your mate, push you to the edge, and you snapped in a way you've never snapped before? Mm-hmm. Say some stuff you regret you ain't never said to nobody before, right? And it's because for the first time, that thing, and because you're upset with them, you think it's them, but it's not them. See, relationships don't create issues. They reveal the issues that are already there. And that's what I would say is that when you start noticing, man, I'm really edgy, it's probably because you're not doing enough to invest in that particular aspect of your life, because a mate forces that out of you because they need something. Very practical. One, create a schedule. Right? If you're an artist, you're creative, and I'm a cultural thinker, speaker, I have to have a schedule. I have 3 children, I have a beautiful wife, and we have to create some normacy so she can know you're gonna be home at this time, you're gonna be here and there. I can't just pop in and out, right? So to the best of your ability, create a schedule. 2, do your best to invest in your family by investing in your own life, right? Too oftentimes we think if we just fix each other, it's going to be good. Really, I bring my best to her. I bring whoever I am into the relationship. And if who I am isn't growing, then that's all I can bring at the moment, right? Third thing I would say this is narrow down your profession and figure out how to start delegating. Oftentimes, we're overly consumed in a particular profession because we only think we're the only ones that know how to do it. And it's because we don't really understand that particular discipline or that genre or whatever. And so we don't have margin to be with our family and with our kids, to be able to invest in them. Last thing is this, do things together. So Vanja and I, we started Build a Better Us 9 years ago. And we realized we needed to do something as couples. And so we created a small group culture for couples. And so every week, Vanja and I are meeting with couples because we want to invest in our marriage. But it's on the calendar. And I know every single week, her and I are going to be talking about our relationship. And it's something we do together. Even if it's not Build a Better Us, you figure out something that you guys are doing together. Invest in your own, emotional intelligence, maturity. Also, put yourself in a situation where you can understand your field so you can delegate better while you create a schedule. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
She's right there in the middle.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I have a question about leadership and that you were talking about in a relationship. The leadership implies that the lady would submit. However, my question is, I've heard teaching where a woman isn't meant to submit to anyone but her husband. So a woman is meant to submit to her father or to her pastor and so on. So what does that look like in a relationship for a woman? Is she meant to submit to her boyfriend or is she meant to submit to her husband? That's my question.
Man.
I am so glad that out of every day and every opportunity I've ever had, I've not done something like this, but I'm gonna put my wife on the spot, y'all. So I'm so glad to be able to pass the mic.
First of all, I love your accent. Beautiful. Okay, so I'll start at the end of your question. I would not say submit to your boyfriend or any boyfriend. Just, I mean, the level of respect as a godly man or a brother, if he is a brother in the faith, then we submit to him as we are just walking in faith. Just as a sister and brother, I think there is a level of respect that goes. And then there's a level of respect as a male. I think it's healthy. I teach my daughters to respect their brothers, even though they're younger, because they one day will be respected by wives. And so I just try and, I think, teach that. So I would say that's healthy, but just not a level of respect as if he is your husband, because the union that God creates in marriage, like that man is the one that you submit to. Pastor, you're a pastor, I would say yes, you submit to him in the leadership role that God has given him over you and your spouse, or over you as a single woman, possibly, almost like a father, like a spiritual father, I would say, if he is a godly leader, a godly pastor. Is he accountable to the word? Is he accountable to other people in the church? Then yes, submit. I think it could be modeled out better maybe if you have relationships with women in the church. If it's a solid, like Bible-believing church where they're leading and teaching from the scripture, then maybe you could kind of see how it looks modeled out from a married perspective or a single woman perspective. But regarding, I think, the beginning of your question, is our responsibility as wives is to submit to our husbands. God created that we would walk alongside them and that we would help them, the way that Preston was saying, just to better fulfill the call that God has for their lives. And then again, as I spoke a little bit earlier, trusting that their leadership has been appointed by God. And so one of my favorite verses, 1 Peter 3, I think 1 Peter 3. 1 Peter, I love where it talks about us being women who are not adorned by the outward appearance, but more so by the gentle and quiet spirit. A little bit further down, it talks about how we are Sarah's daughters if we submit under our husbands, calling them Lord, and not fearing what is fearful. And I love that passage because I think that just as wives, we tend to come to a place, and then maybe even like a single that will soon be married, like we come to a place where it's very difficult for us to submit in a situation, especially if we're not sure what the outcome is going to look like, or it doesn't look like the best outcome. And it says that we are Sarah's daughters if we do not fear what is fearful. And I think back on what Sarah's life looked like. Her husband told her to pretend that she was his sister, and she was taken in to be to be used as a concubine. And she said, "Yes, Lord," knowing that it didn't look grim that it looked grim for her, but her submission to her husband was really to the Lord. Yeah. And because of that, like the curse that came on the kingdom, and she ended up being taken away. But then her husband suggested that she do it again. And she said yes again. And that's always, it blows my mind to see that her willingness to even go in that situation, not saying that it's healthy that we would just agree, like, hey, okay, put me in this bad situation, but knowing ultimately that her hope was in the Lord and that his protection over her covered anything that her husband could ever do, willingly or unwillingly. So I think basically I would say, and I hope this is helping in answering your question, that our role as wives is to submit to our husbands as unto the Lord, knowing that at the end of the day, whatever happens, we submit and we trust their leadership. God will protect us. He will honor us because of our willingness to submit to him. So,
amen. Would y'all give it up for the panel? Just a few housekeeping things for you guys. We are passing out surveys. We definitely want to get feedback from this session. And so you'll look up and you'll see a survey. If you could briefly pass out the survey. Also, if you came in our last session, one thing we try to do is we try to promote healthy people and healthy relationships at buildabetterus.com. And so that's one of our desires. And so we have our tees. I'm a mess. They're 30% off. You're not going to get a 30% off discount ever again, but we have them here to the side, and we take card. And then also, and I want us to all the panel on this, but I'm going to do it anyway. We're going to end off with one thing we would share to either couples or singles, one practical thing. But I was going to say, one thing that I would encourage you guys in, if you don't have a mentor, a life coach, a healthy couple, pursue someone, right? It doesn't matter if you are single. It doesn't matter if you're dating. It doesn't matter if you're married. Find some healthy people and insert them into your life. Again, if you're interested in the one-to-one life coaching, Build a Better Us is in the process of hiring a bunch of life coaches, right? Because, again, we want healthy people, healthy couples. But if you're interested in that service, make sure you talk to Vanja. She'll give you one of our cards. This is Vanja. She'll give you one of our cards, and we'll connect with you on that. And if we could, we'll just end with one thing I would encourage people with, either couples or singles in this journey. I guess I'll go first. So if I could encourage you guys in anything, and you can talk to us afterwards, if I could encourage singles or couples in one thing, it would be this. I want to see if y'all was listening. Don't trust your intuition. There's been so many times that my intuition has failed me in mature relationships, that it wasn't until I got to the point of crisis that I realized I didn't know what I was doing. And I was woefully unprepared for the task ahead of me, right? This last 17 years, but specifically the last 15 years of marriage has been a journey because I've had to unlearn so many things, so many poor habits, so many wrong presuppositions. I don't know if you guys listen to Y'all Too Holy. Jay-Z just dropped the album. Jay-Z just dropped the album. But on one of the records, he talks about how he's regretful at this age, right, of the way he treated women. He got that song, Girls, Girls, Girl. Like now he's saying, yo, I messed up. Like the way I objectified you, and that wasn't okay, and I was a young boy without a father. And so what I would say is intuition can create a lot of devastation. Not that there can't be restoration over time, but don't trust it. And so like I said, if I could encourage you with anything, read books, go to healthy conferences, find you a mentor, get you a life coach, get around some healthy couples you can ask questions to, and be able to receive and begin to potentially even deconstruct. We call it holding things loosely, right? The only thing I don't hold loosely is Jesus dying on my behalf. Everything else is me holding loosely in this life, and that's what allows me to grow. So that's the one thing I would encourage everyone in.
I would say don't expect to have a healthy relationship if you are an unhealthy individual. So I know sometimes we're biased to ourselves, but if there's things that your close, honest friends or even family continue to tell you, like, you need to begin to process through those things and do a self-examination. And, sometimes some of your previous experiences from as early as you can remember, maybe 4 or 5 years old up until adulthood, create some unhealthy things in your lives. If it's an unhealthy perspective on relationships and marriage, to an unhealthy perspective on yourself and your self-esteem or your identity. You have fears and, trust issues. Don't think that just because while you're a believer or you're a Christ follower that all those things just went away. Actually do some digging to figure out, what are the root of some of these things that I'm struggling with, and how can I begin to combat those lies with truths through scriptures and through counseling, life coaching, or whatever. But just know that you're not going to create a healthy relationship if you are an unhealthy individual. And, a lot of times you can know if you're an unhealthy individual by some of the unhealthy things that you may think and say and do. So,
what I'll say real quick, one for the singles is the more content you are in marriage, the less incontent you probably. The more content you are in your singleness, the less incontent you will be in marriage. Like, marriage is not meant to to complete us, right? But to sanctify us. So if you don't feel like you're whole now, you're not going to be whole in marriage. Like God puts two whole people together for His glory, not two half people to make a whole. So work on being content now, and for the people who are aspiring to be married or people who are married, one thing I learned in this book, Momentary Marriage, is staying in love is not the same thing as staying in marriage. It's not saying that we shouldn't ascribe to marriage, but it's not the same thing. Marriage is a covenant-keeping relationship, something that cannot be broken, that we honor first. And if we have that locked down, everything else will follow.
Single or married, my advice would be to revisit your identity in Christ. Write it down, take a picture of it, sing about it, and hold fast to it, because there are highs and lows in both seasons. Remembering who we are in Christ, our value to Him, all that Christ has done for us, many years, 2,000 years ago. What we're walking in now, our promises for our future, for eternity, are limitless. And so my advice would be revisit our identities. Remember who we are in Him, and like find joy in that. And whatever season of life we go through, because even beautiful seasons of marriage, hard things come. When I lost my dad 4 years ago as well. I didn't know BJ had lost his dad 4 years ago, but I lost my dad 4 years ago. And my husband told me, you went through a year of depression. And I didn't know. And so that was a really hard season. I had a 6-month-old, and it was just very difficult. And having to find my hope and my joy in Jesus had nothing to do with my marriage. Like finding my joy in His immutability, like that He hasn't changed, that He hasn't moved, nothing about Him is different. That was all I had. And so I just was kind of thinking, like, what can I say that would encourage? And I would say, like, remembering who we are, remembering what He has done for us, and like letting that be what motivates your everyday life and your next decisions and your next seasons of life.
I had someone, we had a season, Jamie already told you guys at the beginning that we have 7 children, right? But we had 1 child, and then we had 3 years of miscarriage after miscarriage, and then we actually went to a genetic specialist. They said, you guys can never have kids again. And so we went to she went to a women's retreat, and some women prayed for her. And then we found out that we were pregnant, and then they showed us that we were losing the baby again. And they said, just go home and wait. We went home and waited, and then Zion was born 9 months later. And then 5 months later, we were pregnant again, and then Journey was born. And then 4 months later, 2 months later, we were pregnant again, and then Justice was born 9 months later. And then so it was like boom, boom, boom. And you know what happened? You know what happened, y'all? We went from 1 child to 4 children in 2.5 years. Okay, and so in 3 years we had 2.5 kids. I mean, so 2.5 years we had 3 kids. All right. So this is what I want to say. You know what happened? We really all of a sudden was like, wait, hold up. The Lord done poured out a blessing that we can't even receive, right? Just all of a sudden. And so then we start trying to figure out, like, do we have more children? Do we not have more children? Birth control okay? Is it not? Sterilization, should we not? And we were going around talking to pastors, talking to disciples. We called into the local radio station. We called family members. We were reading books. We were trying to find everything. And we were finding everything. And you know what? The most wisdom that I received from somebody during that season was get to know God. And I actually took offense at first. He was like, you need to get to know God. And I was like, what do you mean by that? He was like, no, you need to get to know God. And what he was saying to me was, get to know God's heart for you and what His will is for you. So whatever the question is that you got in your head that you didn't get to answer, the best advice we could offer you is to pursue the Lord. Get to know Him. Draw near to Him, and He will draw near to you. All right? And so we're going to close in prayer. Thank you guys so much for this afternoon. And don't forget about the shirts. Father, thank you so much for your grace. It has been just evident, Lord, that you help us, even on the fly, as questions come and burdens are held up to you, Lord. I thank you so much for the questions and the answers that you have provided. I ask you that you would continue to be glorified in all things. Lord, I pray that you would bless those single men and women who are here today, who are working through what you have for them in a spouse and marriage, and even whether or not you're calling them to singleness. I pray for engaged couples and dating couples, that they would be honoring to you, and at the same time, Lord, that they would be honoring to one another, that they would be esteeming one another's desires and wants over and above their own, and not be selfish and pursuing their own ambitions, Lord. And I pray even that same thing for marriages, and just ask that you would continue to bless the marriages, the couples who are here and represented in this whole conference, Lord, that you would continue to lead us all into leaving a legacy that essentially points back to you and your covenant-keeping love with your church. We bless you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Next is the Poetry Slam. It's over there. Y'all come to the Poetry Slam. Check it out. It's going to be dope.